and welcome to another Shaping Your Success interview brought to you by the Law Society of Scotland and Hay Legal. Today, I am very pleased to be joined by Kerrie Machin, Partner and Head of Business Development at Mitigo Group. Mitigo is a company that will likely be known by many of you as an organisation that specialises in cybersecurity protection services for higher risk market sectors, notably including law firms. Kerrie has spent the last 20 years helping businesses identify their exposure to risk, working now within the cybersecurity sector. Kerrie is a firm believer that cybersecurity needn't keep business leaders awake at night, and it's just a matter of matching the correct solution to the problem. Kerrie, thanks very much for joining us today. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, Rachel. It's good to be here.
Good, yeah, it's lovely to have you. So I just wanted to sort of go straight into it. And I wonder if you could, for those that don't know, tell us a little bit about the history of Mitigo and why it was set up in the first place.
Sure. Well, it wasn't set up overnight. In fact, we've been working on the proposition as far back as 2016 before we actually launched the services a couple of years later. And I suppose why? Well, I suppose over at least the last decade or so, we've seen a lot more digitization within businesses, relying far more on technology. We're more increasingly interconnected. And so online and digital security has become more and more important. When you think about cyber criminals who want to make money out of financial crime, they've increasingly moved to digital attacks. And I think one of the things that we recognized is they weren't just going after governments and big institutions or large companies. They were starting to realize that SMEs were quite easy targets because they didn't dedicate as much time or energy or didn't have the expertise to defend those attacks, as it were, or to understand the risks that they had. And when we considered some of the existing frameworks that businesses could use to try and help them, such as ISO 27001, they're probably designed for larger organizations. And then we also saw the change in attitude to the protection of personal data. Obviously, with the introduction of GDPR, that meant that there was going to be an increase in the amount of legislative requirement and regulatory requirement. And we decided that we wanted to come up with a service that would cater for, well, a package that would help these SMEs, if you like, and in particular, law firms. And what we realized is that package needed to look not just at technology, because I think too many businesses consider cybersecurity to be a pure IT or tech play when it isn't. It needed to include the threat that the behavior of people and business process bring to the organization, but also to have some form of control framework that had good governance around it, because that's what was going to be required by the regulators. And so we developed, long story short, I suppose, we developed a package that allowed us to meet those requirements. And in doing so, it also meant that firms were able to get independent assurance from someone other than their IT provider, because actually, I think most people have come to recognize that IT and cybersecurity are completely different disciplines nowadays. IT are there for functionality that will bring some security, but actually, if you want to fully understand your cyber risk, you need to bring in people that do it full time, understand how cyber criminals work, and then are also not marking their own homework. So I guess that's a brief history of where we came from. It might be a little too long, but hopefully that helps.
No, that's perfect. And as much as you say, obviously, the company definitely wasn't built overnight. I think now we can confidently say it's a success story. Can you talk to us a little bit about this success and sort of how it came around?
Well, we've grown quite well and at a pace that we'd hoped to grow at. It's not been easy. It's not for new businesses. But I think one of the reasons why we feel that we've been reasonably successful is that we identified particular markets where we knew our service would be valued. You know, our partners here at Mitigo have experience already in the legal and financial services sectors. And we recognised if we developed relationships with the regulators or trade bodies within those sectors, that we could get our message across to their members and their firms. As the listeners will well know, we work closely with the Law Society, but also the Law Society of England and Wales and the Bar Council. And we do work in other sectors as well. But I must say we are particularly strong in the legal sector. It's one of our specialisms. And, you know, the firms that work with us, I think, understand the true value of what we bring in the services that we deliver.
Yeah, and I think just with the type of work the legal sector work in, and the types of transactions that they make, and the data, the sensitive data that we might store, it does unfortunately make us attractive to cyber criminals. So are you able just to elaborate a little bit more on what Mitigo could do specifically for these firms?
Yeah, sure. So I suppose, first of all, because we've got a high percentage of law firms as clients, we understand that market from a risk perspective, not just in the way that the attacks are structured by the cyber criminals themselves. So obviously, we have to understand how they want to get into organization systems and what it is they want to do when they get in there. But obviously, we understand how law firms are structured, the technology they use, case management, practice management, behavior, business processes. Each firm might be uniquely different in what they deliver, but there will be a lot of similarities that we can then understand, which helps us deliver that package, but also in understanding what the requirement of the regulator is, so that we can sit there and say, right, what we can do for you is we can allow you to understand your risk, allow you to put controls in place, but not, as I mentioned earlier, not just from an IT perspective. Let's make sure we understand the things that your staff are doing, whether those behaviors are safe or not, because lots of people work from home nowadays. People share things like passwords, or they duplicate passwords, or they're not as secure as perhaps they could be. So we allow the businesses to understand that. Then we can work on those controls, yes, with the tech, yes, around the people, but more importantly, put that framework, as I mentioned earlier, of governance around it. But what I think it really gives to our clients is peace of mind. They know that they're adhering to their regulatory responsibility, but more importantly, that they're looking after their clients' data, their staff's data, and the firm's financial well-being for the future.
Yeah, exactly. And I can imagine that could be a big stressor for a partner, a manager in a firm, is what do we do if something like this does happen? And I wonder what you would perhaps say to the individual or the firm who perhaps thinks that they're not at risk due to the size of their firm. What would you say to those kinds of individuals or businesses?
I think it's important to recognize that firms are not necessarily targets. Vulnerability is the target. If you do not understand your cyber risk, and you have risk, and that is vulnerability, then cyber criminals are able to look at that vulnerability and then exploit it. And what we're seeing, particularly in the legal market, is there's a lot of vulnerability. And the reason that they're attractive to these criminals is because law firms obviously hold a lot of sensitive data, which is extremely valuable out on places like the dark web. And also, not only is the data valuable, but they instruct and move quite a lot of money around. And in doing so, all of this is based around money. That's what the cyber criminals are eventually after, whether they extort you for it or whether they can make people pay it, almost accidentally, as it were. So no, you're not too small to be a target. We've dealt with attacks that range from one-man bands all the way up to, firms with many hundreds of staff, everything in between. So, please don't think that way. If you're a small firm thinking you're not a target, that's not the right way to think.
Yeah, it's an issue for everyone, no matter what the size is. And just lastly, and I think we've kind of touched on this, Kerrie, how important is all of this? What would you say the benefits are to the firm who wants to sort of invest time, resource into cyber risk management?
I think it's probably important to understand the consequences of getting this wrong. They are catastrophic, or they can be catastrophic. We've seen businesses end because of it. Now, that doesn't happen all the time, but it certainly, destroys the reputation of businesses. Clients are going to lose money. You're going to lose money. If you have to pay a ransom payment, you need to decide whether you want to pay that payment. What about if your systems are encrypted and you're down for 3 or 4 weeks? Getting this wrong has some significant penalties, and not just from things like that. What about fines? Let's go back to me all the way through. I've been talking about the legal responsibility of firms to do this. If you're negligent in this and found to be by someone like the ICO, then they're going to dish out fines, and they're becoming increasingly more, they're just increasing. We're seeing more and more fines being issued because firms aren't doing the things that they should do. And I think what this demonstrates is the difference between this being an IT responsibility. Actually, it's a boardroom responsibility. This is the responsibility of senior leaders within firms to understand their risk and then control it properly, and then being able to prove it not only to themselves, but then to their clients and their regulators. And that just isn't a job for IT. You can't just farm it out to them. You need to work with somebody that can allow you to see that risk, give you visibility of it, and then manage it, and then give you the peace of mind. So is it important? Yeah. I mean, any firm out there that hasn't been the victim of a cyber attack yet will definitely know someone that has, and will know the consequences of it.
Okay, perfect. Kerrie, thank you very much for joining us today. It's been great to chat to you. If you are interested in finding out a little bit more about Mitigo, you can find them on the strategic partner page of the Law Society of Scotland website, or you can reach out to them directly at their website. It's mitigogroup.com. Thank you very much, Kerrie, for coming along. It's been great to chat to you.
Thanks, Rachel. Nice to speak with you too.